This tutorial covers Section 3 of Unit 6, specifically covering the feature of Zero IT. In this section, I'm going to talk about what problem or challenge is presented that Zero IT was designed to solve. We'll talk about Zero IT from the perspective of a Wi-Fi user, what steps they would have to take. And then lastly, we'll figure out how to configure and use Zero IT. Now, Zero IT is one of the various Ruckus features that makes use of user authentication, which was described in a previous video tutorial. So let's now go into more details of this specific feature. Now, there's a variety of ways of securing wireless LANs, which fall into the general categories of authentication and encryption. If using authentication on its own, users must provide some form of credentials to be allowed access to the wireless LAN, but once associated and authenticated to it, any data they send and receive is sent in clear text for anyone with access to a wireless sniffer to read. Now, if you add the additional feature of encryption alongside authentication, then users must be provided with and use one or more encryption keys, which will allow them to encrypt and decrypt their data. If you're familiar at all with various features that implement encryption, you know that one of the golden rules of encryption is that your encryption keys need to be very long and complicated, and that should result in them being virtually uncrackable. However, if a wireless user has to manually input or type in that long, complicated encryption key on their laptop or tablet, there's a great risk that they will mistype it and thereby not be able to send or receive data across the wireless LAN. So this presents a problem. How do you, the network administrator, provide those people with their long, complicated encryption keys, provide it to the wireless clients in such a way that mitigates the possibility that they will incorrectly type it into their device? This is the challenge that the feature of Zero IT solves. If the Zero IT feature is used by itself on a wireless LAN, you can create a single encryption key that can be shared among all of your wireless LAN clients for that particular wireless LAN. And that key can be dynamically configured on their laptops or tablets so that the users never even need to know what it is, much less have to type it in. Now, as this slide states, it's usually not a good idea to provide everyone with the exact same encryption key. So, if you also use the feature of dynamic pre-shared keys alongside the Zero IT feature, then you get the additional benefit that each user can dynamically be provisioned with their own unique keys. And once again, they never even need to know what that key was or have to type it into any fields. So before we see how to configure the feature of Zero IT, let's look at it from a high-level snapshot of the steps involved to make it work. Now, assuming that the feature has already been configured on the Zone Director and that user credentials have already been configured somewhere in a database, the first step would be that a wireless LAN user would need to obtain IP connectivity to the Zone Director's subnet. This could be achieved by either connecting to the wired LAN or maybe connecting to a guest wireless LAN that has certain access restrictions, allowing users access to only certain protected subnets. Upon gaining that IP connectivity, the user would then need to browse to a specific Zero IT activation URL, which is locally processed by the Zone Director controller. Upon browsing to this page, the user would then type in their credentials, which the Zone Director could either validate against its own local database or against an external authentication server. Once authenticated, the Zone Director would then push an executable file to the user's device. This file is named prov.exe, which, when activated, would automatically provision the client's device with the correct wireless LAN encryption key, so that once they connected to the wireless LAN, they would successfully authenticate and encrypt their data. So to recap, the Zero IT feature does require some manual intervention on the part of the wireless LAN user in that they must connect their device to something that will give them IP access to the Zone Director subnet. And furthermore, they need to go to a specific activation URL. Lastly, the user needs to download and start the prov.exe executable file on their device. But once they've taken those 3 steps, they're done. Never in this process does the user need to know or type in the long, complicated encryption key that's needed to access the secure wireless LAN. So from the network administrator's point of view, what needs to be done to configure and use this Zero IT feature? Well, from the Configure tab, you would select the Wireless LANs menu item. After that, you would select any of your existing wireless LANs and click on the Edit option for that wireless LAN. Now, within the page where you edit the settings for that wireless LAN, you will see a box that you could check to enable the Zero IT activation feature. Now, this particular screenshot you see here is also showing that the additional feature of DPSK has also been checked, but this is not mandatory. Zero IT can and will work without using DPSK. I'll talk more about the benefits of using DPSK alongside Zero IT in a subsequent section. That's all you need to do to enable this feature for a particular wireless LAN. Now, by default, when Zero IT is activated for a particular wireless LAN, it will use the local database of the zone director to validate the credentials that are supplied by a wireless LAN user. Alternatively, if you've already configured the zone director such that it knows about and has reachability to an external authentication server, you can select that authentication server here from the drop-down list in the Configure Wireless LAN menus under the Zero IT Activation subsection. Now, before we leave this page, notice that it also gives you the specific URL that users will need to navigate to so that they can activate the Zero IT feature for themselves. The URL simply consists of the IP address of the zone director followed by a / and the word activate. If you happen to be using two zone directors in a smart redundancy configuration and have enabled a management IP address that they both share, that management IP address is the address that potential Zero IT users would navigate to here for Zero IT. So what does this look like from the perspective of the person who's attempting to gain Wi-Fi access? Well, assuming they have IP connectivity to the zone director, which was probably achieved by first connecting to the wired LAN, and they've opened their browser to the /activate URL, they would see a screen that resembles this one. Upon supplying the correct username and password, the client will see a new pop-up window that resembles what you see here. A second later, if pop-ups have not been disabled, another pop-up window will be displayed, giving that user the opportunity to save the prov.exe file to their device. Upon saving the prov.exe file to their local device, the user then needs to run the executable. When the executable is running, you have the option to see the details of what it's doing as it adds the new wireless LAN to your adapter, if it doesn't already exist, and then configures that wireless LAN with the correct encryption passphrase. Zero IT also works on Wi-Fi clients running Mac OS, as well as working on smartphones like the iPhone you see in this slide. Now, there are some clients that don't support the download or running of the prov.exe file. For those particular clients, once they navigate to the zone director's Activate webpage and successfully authenticate, the users could then click on the link that reads, "Click here," which would then give them everything they need in order to manually configure their device with the proper settings and encryption key to access their wireless LAN. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video discussing the concept and configuration of the Zero IT feature.